Well, today we are going to discuss how a heat pump works. To understand how a heat pump works, it is important to consider a fundamental physical principle, which is that when we have a hot body and a cold body, energy flows from the hot body to the cold body. And that we do know. When we touch something hot, our hand receives energy, but the other way, it is not possible. Energy will never pass from a cold source to a hot source. Okay? With this in mind, once you understand this principle, how a heat pump works is quite easy. Let's leave it there in the corner so that we don't forget that it can only be done in one direction. That is, from hot fire, from something hot to something cold, and let's see what happens. When we have a house where it is 30 degrees inside and it is hot, and we want to air condition it, what we would like is to remove the heat from inside. But what happens is that outside we have 40 degrees, there is more temperature, so this process cannot be carried out. From heat to cold, but from the least warm, 30 degrees, which would be the cold, towards something at 40 degrees, at a higher temperature, it is not possible to perform an energy transfer. So what do? Well, we install an air conditioner. It is hot, we have no option but to install a heat pump. How does this heat pump operate? And how do we make that 30-degree air transfer its energy to the outside, to something that has a higher temperature? Initially, the main function of a heat pump is to establish energy loops, specifically for energy exchange purposes. I would make an internal air loop, move the air in the room, and an external air loop, we will see for what, but we will always have two air loops. We make them small so they do not bother the rest of the images. Well, what a heat pump does is, in its interior coil, which is inside what is typically referred to as a split unit, it has a coil where the gas changes from liquid to gas state, it evaporates, thus capturing energy and converting it into a usable form. That energy capture, for those of you who are not very knowledgeable about this topic, we can consider it as creating a cold surface. For example, at 4 degrees. By having a cold surface or by causing that freon, when evaporating, to capture energy from the environment, however you want to see it, it is possible to make a transfer, because we have something at 30 degrees, which when flowing through that battery, comes into contact with something much colder, 4 degrees, so that heat can flow. Having done this, we should throw that heat out into the street. But we still encounter a situation where energy or heat cannot flow from something cold to something hotter. So that path is not valid for us. What do? Well, we employ the same technique as in this location, but in the opposite direction. We install a compressor and transform the gases that have been expelled from this location into hot gases. Besides applying pressure, which will be beneficial later for closing the cycle, our action is to heat it. How much? Above the ambient temperature. With this, we will have a condenser or a hot location where the gases undergo a transformation and return to a liquid state once again. They become condensed. I reiterate, if you are not highly skilled, envision this as a cold surface and this as a hot surface. With this, the air, when passing through here, we can indeed make something hot become something colder or less hot, however you want to say it. With that, the loop is already done. Then we will install the expansion valve so that it can go through the whole cycle again. But in the end, as you have seen, with 2 tricks, we did manage to make the heat pump transfer energy from less hot areas to hotter areas. How would the heat pump be reversed? Well, what we do is place this battery here and place this battery here. We turn it around, no problem. What occurs when we have, for instance, a chiller? Instead of an air battery, we would have a plate exchanger, where the evaporating freon circulates. And I will not come into contact except with a metal plate in the middle, and on the other hand, freon would circulate while water would circulate, and we cool the water to lower its temperature. So this is the beginning of the heat pump that works for both the display in your house and for a chiller, as well as for a rooftop or any equipment that works in heat pump mode.